Hello, friends, and welcome to Bedtime Stories with Lorelei. Tonight, we are continuing our journey around the world through fairy tales and stopping at another country of my ancestry, Germany. How could I pass up an opportunity to explore the prolific work of the Brothers Grimm? We will recount 5 of their clever tales that I was not personally familiar with. These are stories of men trying to make their way in the world. Stories comparing the wise and foolish brothers and the consequences of a sharp tongue. With apologies to my nephew, who requested some of the gorier fairy tales by the Brothers Grimm, I will admit that I found some, but honestly wouldn't want to hear those tales before drifting off to sleep. The morals of those stories were to be careful, because some people will do cruel and evil things to you, even when you have been nice to them. One only needs to turn the evening news on to learn that lesson, if you haven't already learned it in life yourself. But fairy tales were told to children back in a time when people occasionally tried to scare children into behaving with a story. Life was harder and harsher for folks back then, though adults understand the historical context of the stories. Parents use discretion for your kids. I am taking this journey around the world through fairy tales because I am interested in hearing the stories that were told to my ancestors in ages past, and I am curious as to why some of those stranger tales are so similar. The supernatural themes often have common threads all over the globe at a time when man wasn't able to communicate with one another as easily as we do today. These ancient stories are fascinating because they often explain cultural norms and beginnings. If these things interest you as well, then I encourage you to subscribe to my channel so that you won't miss a night on our journey around the world. And don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed our story, so that others will know to watch our video too. And also, please leave a comment and let me know how you slept. If I can help even one fellow insomniac get a good night's sleep, it would bring me such joy. And that is the ultimate goal of this channel. It's to bring a good, healthy, restorative night's sleep to all who come here to listen and to hear a good story. So, before we begin the Brothers Grimm's tales, let's start with some relaxation exercises so that we can ensure that we have a perfectly relaxed and restorative night's sleep tonight. Just a reminder, please don't listen to this relaxation video while driving or operating heavy machinery, okay? Thanks. Find a comfortable, cozy position and let's begin. Close your eyes gently and take a deep breath in through your nose, allowing your lungs to fill with fresh, calming air. Hold it for a moment and then exhale slowly through your mouth, releasing any tension. Now, imagine yourself in a serene meadow. The sun is setting, casting a warm golden glow across the landscape. You can feel the soft grass beneath you and the gentle breeze brushing against your skin. As you continue to breathe deeply, listen to the soothing sounds of nature. Picture a nearby river. Its continuous flow creating a melodic rhythm. Birds singing softly in the background, and leaves rustle in the trees. Let these sounds wrap around you like a comforting blanket. Now, shift your focus to the sky above. Imagine lying on the grass, watching fluffy clouds slowly drift by. Each cloud carries away any lingering thoughts or worries. As you gaze upwards, the colors of the sunset paint the clouds with hues of pink, orange, and lavender. With each breath, inhale the tranquility of this moment. Imagine the clouds taking away any stress or tension you may be holding. Exhale, letting go of anything that no longer serves you. Feel the support of the earth beneath you and the vastness of the open sky above. Allow your mind to be as expansive as the clouds, free and weightless. Continue to breathe in the peaceful scene around you, letting the nature sounds and the cloud watching guide you into a state of deep relaxation. Stay in this calming space for a few moments, enjoying the serenity. When you're ready, slowly bring your awareness back to the present moment. Carry this sense of calm with you as you transition to our bedtime stories, allowing it to enhance your overall relaxation. Thank you for joining this meditation. May your night be filled with peaceful dreams. King Thrushbeard. A king had a daughter who was beautiful beyond measure, but so proud and haughty withal that no suitor was good enough for her. She sent away one after the other and made fun of all of them as well. Once the king gave a great feast and invited thereto, from far and near, all of the young men likely to marry. They were marshaled in a row according to their rank and standing. First in came the kings, then the grand dukes, then the princes, then the earls, the barons, and the gentry. Then the king's daughter was led through the ranks, but to everyone she had some objections to make. One was too fat. "The wine cask," she said. Another was too tall. "Long and thin, has little in." The third was too short. "Short and thick is never quick." The fourth was too pale as death. The fifth too red, a fighting cock. The sixth was not straight enough, a green log dried behind the stove. So she had something to say against everyone. But she made herself especially merry over a good king who stood quite high up in the row and whose chin had grown a little crooked. "Well," she cried and laughed, "he has a chin like a thrush's beak." And from that time he got the name of King Thrushbeard. But the old king, when he saw that his daughter did nothing but mock people and despised all the suitors who were gathered there, was very angry and swore that she should have for her husband the very first beggar that came to his doors. A few days afterward, a fiddler came and sang beneath the windows, trying to earn a small alms. When the king heard him, he said, "Let him come up." So the fiddler came up in his dirty, ragged clothes and sang before the king and his daughter. When he had ended, he asked for a trifling gift. The king said, "Your song has pleased me so well that I will give you my daughter as my gift to wife." The king's daughter shuddered, but the king said, "I have taken an oath to give you to the very first beggar man, and I will keep it." All she could say was in vain. The priest was brought, and she had to let herself be wedded to the fiddler on the spot. When that was done, the king said, "Now, it is not proper for you, a beggar woman, to stay any longer in my palace. You may go away with your husband." The beggar man let her out by the hand, and she was obliged to go away on foot with him. When they came to a large forest, she asked, To whom does that beautiful forest belong? It belongs to King Thrushbeard. If you had taken him, it would have been yours. Ah, unhappy girl that I am, if I had but taken King Thrushbeard. Afterward, they came to a meadow, and she asked again, to whom does this beautiful green meadow belong? It belongs to King Thrushbeard. If you had taken him, it would have been yours. Oh, unhappy girl that I am, if I had but taken King Thrushbeard. They then came to a large town, and she asked again, to whom does this fine large town belong? It belongs to King Thrushbeard. If you had taken him, it would have been yours. Oh, unhappy girl that I am, if I had but taken King Thrushbeard. It does not please me, said the fiddler, to hear you always wishing for another husband. Am I not good enough for you? At last, they came to a very little hut, and she said, oh goodness, what a small house. To whom does this miserable, mean hovel belong? The fiddler answered, that is my house, and yours, where we shall live together. She had to stoop in order to go in at the low door. Where are the servants? Said the king's daughter. What servants? Answered the beggar man. You must do what you wish to have done. Just make a fire at once and set on water to cook my supper. I am quite tired. But the king's daughter knew nothing about lighting fires or cooking, and the beggar man had to lend a hand himself to get anything fairly done. When they had finished their scanty meal, they went to bed. But he forced her to get up quite early in the morning in order to look after the house. For a few days, they lived in this way, as well as might be, and ate up all the food in the house. Then the man said, Wife, we cannot go on longer eating and drinking here and earning nothing. You must weave baskets. He went out, cut some willows, and brought them home. Then she began to weave, but the tough willows wounded her delicate hands. I see that this will not do, said the man. You had better spin. Perhaps you can do that. She sat down and tried to spin, but the hard thread soon cut her soft fingers so that the blood ran down. See, said the man, you are fit for no sort of work. I have made a bad bargain with you. Now, I will try to earn a living by selling pots and earthenware. You must sit in the marketplace and sell the ware. Alas, thought she, if any of the people in my father's kingdom come to the market and see me there selling, how they will mock me. But it was of no use. She had to yield unless she chose to die of hunger. She succeeded well, for the people were glad to buy the woman's wares because she was good looking, and they paid her what she asked. Many even gave her the money and left the pots with her as well. So they lived on what she had earned as long as it lasted. But then the husband brought a lot of new crockery. With this, she sat down at the corner of the marketplace and she set it all around her ready for sale. But suddenly, there came a drunken soldier galloping along, and he rode right amongst the pots, so that they were all broken into 1,000 bits. She began to weep and did not know what to do for fear. "Alas, what will happen to me?" cried she. "What will my husband say to this?" She ran home and told him of the misfortune. "Who would seat herself at a corner of the marketplace with crockery?" said the man. "Leave off crying. I see very well that you cannot do ordinary work. So I have been to our king's palace and have asked whether they cannot find a place for a kitchen maid. They have promised me to take you. In that way, you will get your food for nothing." The king's daughter was now a kitchen maid and had to be the cook's beck and call and do the dirtiest work. In each of her pockets she fastened a little jar in which she took home her share of the leavings. And upon this they lived. It happened that the wedding of the king's eldest son was to be celebrated. So the poor woman went and placed herself by the door of the hall to look on. When all of the candles were lit and people, each more beautiful than the other, entered, and all was full of pomp and splendor, she thought of her lot with a sad heart and cursed the pride and haughtiness which had humbled her and brought her to such great poverty. The smell of the delicious dishes which were being taken in and out reached her, and now and then the servants threw her a few morsels. These she put into her jars to take home. All at once, the king's son entered, clothed in velvet and silk, with gold chains about his neck. And when he saw the beautiful woman standing by the door, he seized her by the hand and would have danced with her, but she refused and shrank back with fear, for she saw it was King Thrushbeard, her suitor, whom she had driven away with scorn. Her struggles were of no use. He drew her into the hall, but the string by which her pockets were fastened broke. The pots fell down, the soup ran out, and the scrapes were all scattered all around. And when the people saw it, there arose laughter and derision, and she was so ashamed that she would rather have been 1,000 fathoms below ground. She sprang to the door and would have run away, but on the stairs a man caught her and brought her back, and when she looked at him, it was King Thrushbeard. he said to her kindly, "Do not be afraid. I and the fiddler who has been living with you in that wretched hovel are one. For love of you, I disguised myself so. And I also was the soldier who rode through your crockery. This was all done to humble your proud spirit and to punish you for the insolence in which you mocked me." Then she wept bitterly and said, "I have done a great wrong and am not worthy to be your wife." But he said, "Be comforted. The evil days are past. Now we will celebrate our wedding." Then the maids in waiting came and put the most splendid clothing on her. Her father and his whole court arrived and wished her happiness in her marriage to King Thrushbeard. And the joy now began in earnest. I wish you and I had been there too. Dr. Know-All. There was once on a time a poor peasant called Crab, who drove 2 oxen with a load of wood to town and sold it to a doctor for $2. When the money was being counted out to him, it so happened that the doctor was sitting at table. And when the peasant saw how daintily he ate and drank, his heart desired what he saw, and he would willingly have been a doctor. So he remained standing a while, and at length inquired if he, too, could not be a doctor. "Oh, yes," said the doctor, "that is soon managed." "What must I do?" asked the peasant. "In the first place, buy yourself an ABC book of the kind which has a cock on the frontispiece. In the second, turn your cart and your 2 oxen into money, and get yourself some clothes, and whatsoever else pertains to medicine. Thirdly, have a sign painted with the words, 'I am Dr. Know-All,' and have that nailed up above your house door." The peasant did everything that he had been told to do. When he had doctored people for a while, but not long, a rich and great lord had some money stolen. Then he was told about Dr. Know-All, who lived in such and such a village, and must know what had become of the money. So the lord had the horses put in his carriage, drove out to the village, and asked Crab if he were Dr. Know-All. "Yes," he said, he was. Then he was to go with him and bring back the stolen money. "Oh, yes, but Greta, my wife, must go too." The lord was willing, and let both of them have a seat in the carriage. They all drove away together. When they came to the nobleman's castle, the table was spread, and Crab was told to sit down and eat. "Yes, but my wife Greta must eat with me," he said, and he seated himself with her at the table. And when the first servant came with a dish of delicate fare, the peasant nudged his wife and said, "Greta, that was the first," meaning that was the servant who brought the first dish. The servant, however, thought he intended by that as to say, "That is the first thief." And he actually was, So he was terrified and said to his comrade outside, "The doctor knows all. We shall fare badly. He said I was the first." The second did not want to go in at all, but was obliged to. So when he went in, the peasant nudged his wife and said, "Greta, that is the second." This servant was so frightened that he got out. With the third, it did not fare any better, for the peasant said again, "Greta, that is the third." The fourth had to carry in a covered dish. In it were crabs. The Lord told the doctor that he must show his skill by guessing what was under the cover. The doctor looked at the dish, had no idea what was in it, and cried out, "Alas, poor crab!" When the Lord heard that, he cried, "There! He knows who has the money." At this, the servants were terribly anxious. They winked at the doctor to come out to them. When he went out, they all four confessed that they had stolen the money and that they were willing to restore it. They led him to the spot where it was hidden. Thus, the Lord got back his wealth, and Dr. Know-all received a large reward and became a famous man. How 6 men got on in the world. There was once a man who understood all kinds of arts. He served in war and behaved well and bravely. But when the war was over, he received his dismissal and 3 farthings for his expenses on the way. "Stop," said he, "I shall not be content with this. But if I can meet the right people, the king will have to give me all the treasure of the country." Then, full of anger, he went into the forest and saw a man standing therein who had plucked up 6 trees as if they were blades of corn. He said to him, "Will you be my servant and go with me?" "Yes," he answered, "but first I will take this little bundle of sticks home to my mother." And he took one of the trees, wrapped it round the 5 others, lifted the bundle on his back and carried it away. Then he returned and went with his master, who said, "We two ought to be able to get through the world very well." When they had walked on for a short while, they found a huntsman who was kneeling, had shouldered his gun, and was about to fire. The master said to him, "Huntsman, what are you going to shoot?" He answered, 2 miles from here is a fly, sitting on the branch of an oak tree. I want to shoot out its left eye." "Oh, come with me," said the man. "If we 3 are together, we certainly ought to be able to get on in the world." The huntsman was ready and went with him. They came to 7 windmills, whose sails were turning round with great speed, yet no wind was blowing either on the right or the left, and no leaf was stirring. Then said the man, "I know not what is driving the windmills. Not a breath of air is stirring." And he went onward with his servants. And when they had walked 2 miles, they saw a man sitting on a tree, who was shutting one nostril and blowing out the other. "Good gracious, what are you doing up there?" He answered, 2 miles from here are 7 windmills. Look, I am blowing them till they turn around." "Oh, come with me," said the man. "If we four are together, we shall carry the whole world before us." Then the blower came down and went with him. After a while, they saw a man who was standing on one leg and had taken off the other and laid it beside him. Then the master said, "You have arranged things very comfortably to have a rest." "I am a runner," he replied, "and to stop myself running far too fast, I have taken off one of my legs, for if I run with both, I go quicker than any bird can fly." "Oh, come with me. If we 5 are together, we shall carry the whole world before us." So he went with them. It was not long before they met a man who wore a cap, but had put it quite on one ear. Then the master said to him, "Gracefully, gracefully, don't stick your cap on one ear. You look just like a tomfool." "I must not wear it otherwise," said he, "for if I set my hat straight, a terrible frost comes on, and all the birds in the air are frozen and drop dead on the ground." "Oh, come with me," said the master. "If we 6 are together, we can carry the whole world before us." Now the 6 came to a town where the king had proclaimed that whosoever ran a race with his daughter and won the victory should be her husband, but whoever lost it must lose his head. Then the man presented himself and said, "I will, however, let my servant run for me." The king replied, "Then his life also must be staked, so that his head and thine are both set on the victory." When that was settled and made secure, the man buckled the other leg on the runner and said to him, "Now, be nimble and help us to win." It was fixed that one who was the first to bring some water from a far distant well was to be the victor. The runner received a pitcher, and the king's daughter won too, and they began to run at the same time. But in an instant, when the king's daughter had gotten a very little way, the people who were looking on could see no more of the runner. It was just as if the wind had whistled by. In a short time, he reached the well, filled the pitcher with water, and turned back. Halfway home, however, he was overcome with fatigue and set his pitcher down. He lay down himself and fell asleep. He had, however, made a pillow of a horse's skull, which was lying on the ground, in order that he might lie uncomfortably and soon wake up again. In the meantime, the king's daughter, who could also run very well, quite as well as any ordinary mortal can, had reached the well and was hurrying back with her pitcher full of water when she saw the runner lying there asleep, and she was glad. She said, "My enemy is delivered over into my hands." Emptying his pitcher, she ran on. And now all would have been lost if by good luck the huntsman had not been standing at the top of the castle and not had seen everything with his sharp eyes. Then said he, "The king's daughter shall not prevail against us." He loaded his gun and shot so cleverly that he shot the horse's skull away from under the runner's head without hurting him. Then the runner awoke leapt up and saw that his pitcher was empty and that the king's daughter was already far in advance. He did not lose heart, however, but ran back to the well with his pitcher, again drew some water, and was still at home again 10 minutes before the king's daughter. "Behold," said he, "I have not bestirred myself till now. It did not deserve to be called running before." But it pained the king, and still more his daughter, that she should be carried off by a common disbanded soldier like that. So they took counsel with each other how to get rid of him and his companions. Then the king said to her, "I have thought of a way. Don't be afraid. They shall not come back again." And he said to them, "You shall now make merry together and eat and drink." He conducted them to a room which he had made out of a floor of iron. The doors were also made of iron, and the windows were guarded with iron bars. There was a table in the room covered with delicious food, and the king said to them, "Go in and enjoy yourselves." When they were inside, he ordered the doors to be shut and bolted. Then he sent for the cook and commanded him to make a fire under the room until the iron became red hot. This the cook did, and the 6 who were sitting at table began to feel quite warm, and they thought the heat was caused by the food. But as it became still greater, and they wanted to get out, and found that the doors and the windows were bolted, they became aware that the king had an evil intention and wanted to suffocate them. "He shall not succeed, however," said the one with the cap. "I will cause a frost to come, before which the fire shall be ashamed and creep away." Then he put his cap straight on, and immediately there came such a frost that all the heat disappeared, and the food on the dishes began to freeze. When an hour or 2 had passed by, the king believed that they had perished in the heat. He had the doors opened to behold them himself. But when the doors were opened, all 6 were standing there, alive and well, and said that they should very much like to get out to warm themselves, for the very food was fast frozen to the dishes with the cold. Then, full of anger, the king went down to the cook, scolded him, and asked why he had not done what he had been ordered to do. But the cook replied, "There is heat enough there, just look yourself." Then the king saw that there was a fierce fire burning under the iron room, and perceived that there was no getting the better of the 6 in this way. Again, the king considered how to get rid of his unpleasant guests, and caused their chief to be brought, and said, "If you will take gold and renounce my daughter, you shall have as much as you wish." "Oh, yes, Lord King," he answered. "Give me as much as my servant can carry, and I will not ask for your daughter." On this, the king was satisfied, and the other continued, "In 14 days I will come and fetch it." Thereupon, he summoned together all the tailors in the whole kingdom, and they were to sit for 14 days and sew a sack. And when it was ready, the strong one, who could tear up trees, had to take it on his back and go with it to the king. Then said the king, "Who can that strong fellow be who is carrying a bundle of linen on his back that is as big as a house. And he was alarmed as he said, "What a lot of gold he can carry away." Then he commanded a ton of gold to be brought. It took 16 of his strongest men to carry it. But the strong one snatched it up in one hand, put it in a sack, and said, "Why don't you bring more at the same time? That hardly covers the bottom." Then, little by little, the king caused all of his treasure to be brought thither, and the strong one pushed it into the sack, and still the sack was not half full with it. "Bring more," cried he. "These few crumbs don't fill it." Then 7,000 carts with gold had to be gathered together in the whole kingdom, and the strong one thrust them and the oxen harnessed to them into his sack. "I will examine it no longer," said he, "but will just take what comes, so long as the sack is but full." When all that was inside, there was still room for a great deal more. Then he said, "I will just make an end of the thing. People do sometimes tie up a sack, even when it's not full." So he took it on his back and went away with his comrades. When the king saw how one single man was carrying away the entire wealth of the country, he became enraged and bade his horsemen to mount and pursue the 6, ordered them to take the sack away from the strong one. 2 regiments speedily overtook the 6 and called out, "You are prisoners. Put down the sack with gold, or you will all be cut to pieces." "What say you?" cried the blower. "That we are prisoners? Rather than that should happen, all of you shall dance about in the air." And he closed one nostril, and with the other blew on it the other 2 regiments. Then they were driven away from each other and carried into the blue sky over all the mountains, one here, the other there. One sergeant cried for mercy. He had 9 wounds, and one brave fellow who did not deserve ill treatment. The blower stopped a little so that he came down without injury, and then the blower said to him, "Now go home to your king and tell him that he had better send some more horsemen, and I will blow them all into the air." And when the king was informed of all of this, he said, "Let the rascals go. They have the best of it." Then the 6 conveyed the riches home, divided it amongst themselves, and lived in content until their death. The Golden Bird. In the olden time, there was a king who had behind his palace a beautiful pleasure garden in which there was a tree that bore golden apples. When the apples were getting ripe, that they were counted. But on the very next morning, one was missing. This was told to the king, and he ordered that a watch should be kept every night beneath the tree. The king had 3 sons, the eldest of whom he sent, as soon as night came, into the garden. But when it was midnight, he could not keep himself from sleeping. And next morning again, an apple was gone. The following night, the second son had to keep watch. It fared no better with him. As soon as 12 o'clock had struck, he fell asleep, and in the morning, an apple was gone. Now it came to the turn of the third son to watch. He was quite ready, but the king had not much trust in him and thought that he would be of less use than his brothers. But at last he had let him go. The youth lay down beneath the tree, but kept awake and did not let sleep master him. When it struck 12, something rustled through the air, and in the moonlight he saw a bird who was coming and whose feathers were shining with gold. The bird alighted on the tree and had just plucked off an apple when the youth shot an arrow at him. The bird flew off, but the arrow had struck his plumage, and one of his golden feathers fell down. The youth picked it up, and the next morning took it to the king and told him what he had seen in the night. The king called his council together, and everyone declared that a feather like this was worth more than the whole kingdom. "If the feather is so precious," declared the king, "one alone will not do for me. I must and will have the whole bird." The eldest son set out. He trusted to his cleverness and thought that he would easily find the golden bird. When he had gone some distance, he saw a fox sitting at the edge of a wood. So he cocked his gun and took aim at him. The fox cried, "Do not shoot me, and in return I will give you some good counsel. You are on the way to the golden bird. This evening you will come to a village in which stands 2 inns opposite to one another. One of them is lighted up brightly, and all goes on merrily within, but do not enter it. Go rather into the other, even though it seems a bad one." "How can such a silly beast give wise advice?" thought the king's son, and he pulled the trigger. But he missed the fox, who stretched his tail and ran quickly into the wood. So he pursued his way, and by evening came to the village where the 2 inns were. In one, they were singing and dancing. The other had a poor, miserable look. "I should be a fool indeed," he thought, "if I should go into a shabby tavern and pass by the good one." So he went into the cheerful one, lived there in riot and revel, and forgot the bird and his father and all good counsels. Some time had passed, and when the eldest son, month after month, did not come home, the second set out, wishing to find the golden bird. The fox met him as he had met the eldest, and gave him the good advice, of which he took no heed. He came to the 2 inns. His brother was standing at the window of the one from which came the music and the dancing, and his brother called to him. He could not resist, but went inside, and lived only for pleasure. Again, some time passed, and then the youngest of the king's sons went to set off and try his luck. But his father would not allow it. "It is of no use," said he. "He will be less likely to find the golden bird than his brothers, and if a mishap were to befall him, he knows not how to help himself. He is a little wanting at the best, but at the last, As he had no peace, he let him go. Again, the fox was sitting outside the wood and begged for his life and offered his good advice. The youth was good-natured and said, "Be easy, little fox. I will do you no harm." "You shall not repent it," answered the fox, "and that you may proceed more quickly, get up behind on my tail." And scarcely had he seated himself when the fox began to run, and away he went over stock and stone till his hair whistled in the wind. When they came to a village, the youth got off. He followed the good advice, and without looking around, turned to the little inn, where he spent the night quietly. The next morning, as soon as he got into the open country, there sat the fox already, and said, "I will tell you further what you have to do. Go straight forward. At last, you will come to a castle, in front of which a whole regiment of soldiers is lying. But do not trouble yourself about them, for they will be asleep and snoring. Go through the midst of them straight into the castle. Go through all the rooms, till at last you will come to a chamber where a golden bird is hanging in a wooden cage. Close by, there stands an empty gold cage for show. Beware of taking the bird out of the common cage and putting it into the fine one, or it may go badly with you." With these words, the fox again stretched out his tail, and the king's son seated himself upon it, and away he went over stock and stone till his hair whistled in the wind. Then he came to the castle, where he found everything as the fox had said. The king's son went into the chamber where the golden bird was shut up in a wooden cage, whilst a golden one stood hard by, and the 3 golden apples lay about the room. "But," thought he, "it would be absurd if I were to leave the beautiful bird in the common and ugly cage." So he opened the door, laid hold of it, and put it in the golden cage. But at the same moment, the bird uttered a shrill cry. The soldiers awoke, rushed in, and took him off to prison. The next morning, he was taken before a court of justice, and, as he confessed everything, was sentenced to death. The king, however, said that he would grant him his life on one condition, namely, if he brought him the golden horse, which ran faster than the wind, and in that case he should receive, over and above, as a reward, the golden bird. The king's son set off, but he sighed and was sorrowful, for how was he to find the golden horse? But all at once he saw his old friend the fox sitting on the road. "Look you," said the fox, "this has happened because you did not give heed to me. However, be of good courage. I will help you and tell you how to get the golden horse. You must go straight on, and you will come to a castle, where in the stable stands a horse. The grooms will be lying in front of the stable. They will be asleep and snoring, and you can quietly lead out the golden horse. But of one thing you must take heed. Put on him the common saddle of wood and leather, and not the golden one, which hangs close by, else it will go ill with you." Then the fox stretched out his tail. The king's son seated himself upon it, and away he went over stock and stone until his hair whistled in the wind. Everything happened just as the fox had said. The king's son came to the stable in which the golden horse was standing. But just as he was going to put the common saddle upon him, he thought, "It'll be a shame to such a beautiful beast if I do not give him the good saddle, which belongs to him by right." But scarcely had the golden saddle touched the horse than he began to neigh loudly. The grooms awoke, seized the youth, and threw him into prison. The next morning, he was sentenced by the court to death, but the king promised to grant him his life, and the golden horse as well, if he would rescue the beautiful princess from the golden castle. With a heavy heart, the youth set out, yet luckily for him, he soon found the trusty fox. "I ought to leave you to your ill luck," said the fox, "but I pity you, and I will help you once more out of your trouble. This road takes you straight to the golden castle. You will reach it by eventide, and at night, when everything is quiet, the beautiful princess goes to the bathing house to bathe. When she enters it, run up to her and give her a kiss. Then she will follow you, and you can take her away with you. Only do not allow her to say farewell to her parents first, or it will go ill with you." Then the fox stretched out his tail, and the king's son seated himself upon it. Away the fox went over stock and stone, till his hair whistled in the wind. When he reached the golden castle, it was just as the fox had said. He waited until midnight, when everything lay in deep sleep, and the beautiful princess was going to the bathing house. Then he sprang out and gave her a kiss. She said that she would like to go with him, but she asked him pitifully and with tears to be allowed to take leave of her parents. At first, he withstood her prayer, but when she wept more and more and fell at his feet, at last he gave in. But no sooner had the maiden reached the bedside of her father than he and the rest of the castle awoke, and the youth was laid hold of and put into prison. The next morning, the king said to him, "Your life is forfeited, and you can only find mercy if you take away the hill which stands in front of my windows and prevents my seeing beyond it. And you must finish it all within 8 days. If you do that, you shall have my daughter as your reward." The king's son began, and dug and shoveled without leaving off. But after 7 days, when he saw how little he had done, and how all of his work was as good as nothing, he fell into great sorrow and gave up all hope. On the evening of the 7th day, the fox appeared and said, "You do not deserve that I should take any trouble about you. Nevertheless, go away and lie down to sleep. I will do the work for you." The next morning, when he awoke and looked out of the window, the hill had gone. Full of joy, the youth ran to the king and told him that the task was fulfilled, and whether he liked it or not, the king had to hold to his word and give him his daughter. So the two set forth together, and it was not long before the trusty fox came up with them. "You have certainly got what is best," said he, "but the golden horse also belongs to the maiden of the golden castle. "How shall I get it?" asked the youth. "That I will tell you," answered the fox. "First, take the beautiful maiden to the king who sent you to the golden castle. There will be unheard of rejoicing. They will gladly give you a golden horse and will bring it out to you." All was brought to pass successfully, and the king's son carried off the beautiful princess on the golden horse. The fox did not remain behind and said to the youth, "Now I will help you to get the golden bird. When you come near to the castle where the golden bird is to be found, let the maiden get down, and I will take her into my care. Then ride with the golden horse into the castle yard. There will be great rejoicing at the sight, and they will bring out the golden bird for you." Then all was accomplished, and the king's son was about to ride home with his treasures. The fox said, "Now you shall reward me for my help." "What do you require for it?" asked the youth. "When you get to the wood yonder, shoot me dead and chop off my head and feet." "That would be fine gratitude," said the king's son. "I cannot possibly do that for you." The fox said, "If you will not do it, I must leave you. But before I go away, I will give you a piece of good advice. Be careful about two things. Buy no gallows flesh, and do not sit at the edge of any well." And then he ran into the wood. The youth thought, "That is a wonderful beast. He has strange whims. Who is going to buy gallows flesh? And the desire to sit at the edge of a well has never yet seized me." He rode on with the beautiful maiden, and his road took him again through the village in which his two brothers had remained. There was a great stir and noise, and when he had asked what was going on, he was told that two men were going to be hanged. As he came nearer to the place, he saw that they were his brothers, who had been playing all kinds of wicked pranks and had squandered their entire wealth. He inquired whether they could not be set free. "If you will pay for them," answered the people, "but why should you waste your money on wicked men and buy them free?" He did not think twice about it, but paid for them. And when they were set free, they all went on their way together. They came to the wood where the fox had first met them, and it was cool and pleasant within it. Whilst the sun shone hotly, the two brothers said, "Let us rest a little by the well and eat and drink." He agreed, and whilst they were talking, he forgot himself and sat down by the edge of the well without foreboding any evil. But the two brothers threw him backward into the well, took the maiden, the horse, the bird, and went home to their father. "Here we bring you not only the golden bird," said they. "We have won the golden horse also, and the maiden from the golden castle." Then there was great joy. But the horse would not eat, the bird would not sing, and the maiden sat and wept. But the younger brother was not dead. By good fortune, the well was dry, and he fell upon soft moss without being hurt. But he could not get out again. Even in this strait, the faithful fox did not leave him. He came and leapt down to him, and upbraided him for having forgotten his advice. "But yet I cannot give it up so," he said. "I will help you up again into daylight." He bade him grasp his tail and keep tight hold of it, and then he pulled him up. "You are not out of danger yet," said the fox. "Your brothers were not sure of your death and have surrounded the wood with watchers who are to kill you if you let yourself be seen." But a poor man was sitting upon the road, with whom the youth changed clothes, and in this way he got into the king's palace. No one knew him, but the bird began to sing, the horse began to eat, and the beautiful maiden left off weeping. The king, astonished, asked, "What does this mean?" Then the maiden said, "I do not know, but I have been so sorrowful, and now I am so happy. I feel as if my true bridegroom has come." She told him all that had happened, although the other brothers had threatened her with death if she were to betray anything. The king commanded that all people who were in his castle should be brought before him, and amongst them came the youth in his ragged clothes. But the maiden knew him at once and fell upon his neck. The wicked brothers were seized and put to death, but he was married to the beautiful maiden and declared heir to the king. But how did it fare with the poor fox? Long afterwards, the king's son was once again walking in the wood, when the fox met him and said, "You have everything now that you can wish for, but there is never an end to my misery, and yet it is in your power to free me." And again he asked him with tears to shoot him dead and chop off his head and feet. So he did it, and scarcely was it done when the fox was changed into a man, and was no other than the brother of the beautiful princess, who was at last freed from the magic charm which had been laid upon him. And now nothing was more wanting to their happiness as long as they lived. The Queen Bee. Two king's sons once went out in search of adventures and fell into a wild, disorderly way of living, so that they never came home again. The youngest, who was called Simpleton, set out to seek his brothers. When at length he found them, they mocked him for thinking that he, with his simplicity, could get through the world, when they too could not make their way, and yet they were so much cleverer. When all three traveled away together and came to an anthill, the two elder wanted to destroy it, to see the little ants creeping about in their terror, carrying their eggs away. But Simpleton said, "Leave the creatures in peace. I will not allow you to disturb them." Then they went farther and came to a lake on which a great number of ducks were swimming. The two brothers wanted to catch a couple and roast them, but Simpleton would not permit it and said, "Leave the creatures in peace. I will not suffer you to kill them." At length they came to a bee's nest, in which there was so much honey that it ran out of the trunk of the tree where it was. The two wanted to make a fire under the tree to suffocate the bees in order to take away the honey. But Simpleton again stopped them and said, "Leave the creatures in peace. I will not allow you to burn them." At last, the two brothers arrived at a castle where stone horses were standing in the stables, and no human being was to be seen. They went through the halls until they came to a door in which there were 3 locks. In the middle of the door, there was a little pane through which they could see into the room. There they saw a little gray man sitting at a table. They called him once, twice, but he did not hear. Then they called him for the 3rd time. When he got up, opened the locks, and came out, he said nothing, but led them to a handsomely spread table. And when they had eaten and drunk, he took each of them to a bedroom. Next morning, the little gray man came to the eldest, beckoned him, and conducted him to a stone table on which were inscribed 3 tasks, by the doing of which the castle could be delivered. The first was that in the forest beneath the moss lay the princess's pearls, 1,000 in number, which must be picked up, and if by sunset 1 single pearl was wanting, he who had looked for them would be turned to stone. The eldest went thither and sought the whole day, but when it came to an end, he had found only 100, and what was written on the table came to pass. He was changed into stone. Next day, the 2nd brother undertook the adventure. It did not, however, fare much better with him than with the eldest. He did not find more than 200 pearls, and was changed to stone. At last, the turn came to Simpleton, who sought in the moss. But it was so hard to find the pearls, and he got on so slowly, that he seated himself on a stone and wept. And while he was thus sitting, the king of the ants, whose life he had once saved, came with 5,000 ants, and before long the little creatures had all got the pearls together and laid them in a heap. The 2nd task was to fetch out of the lake the key of the king's daughter's bedchamber. When Simpleton came to the lake, the ducks, which he had saved, swam up to him, dived down, and brought the key out of the water. But the 3rd task was the most difficult. From amongst the 3 sleeping daughters of the king, the youngest and dearest was to be sought out. They resembled each other exactly, and were only to be distinguished by having eaten different sweetmeats before they fell asleep. The eldest, a bit of sugar; the 2nd, a little syrup; the youngest, a spoonful of honey. Then the queen of the bees, which Simpleton had protected from the fire, came and tasted the lips of all 3. At last, she remained sitting on the mouth which had eaten honey, and thus the king's son recognized the right princess. Then the enchantment was at an end. Everything was released from sleep, and those who had been turned to stone received once more their natural forms. Simpleton married the youngest and sweetest princess, and after her father's death became king, while his 2 brothers received the 2 other sisters. that's the end of the tales of the Brothers Grimm. I hope you enjoyed our stop in Germany tonight. Though the Germans tend to tell harsh tales and lessons, these were not too harsh for bedtime. At least I don't think. Could have been worse. No matter. Now is the time to turn inward and to turn off the waking brain. It's time to let the sleeping brain figure out all of the niggling problems of the day so that you can wake up in the morning with all of the answers of all of the niggling problems top of mind and ready for you to write them down and to get a jump on your best life. Remember to tell yourself, every day, in every way, I'm getting better, better, and better. May your dreams be blessed, my beloved friend. Good night, and God bless you.